We want to talk about how to balance the imbalance in the media industry when it comes to women's representation in the media. And of course, also, we will go a notch higher and discuss some of the issues that women in the media are battling with today and talk about the good side, the gains. And with me to talk about all that is Rachel Ombaka, the Vice Chairperson of the Association of Media Women in Kenya. Thank you, Rachel, for creating time for us on a Sunday night. We appreciate that.
Thank you so
but
much.
of course, a good point to start. You're sitting here today just a few days after there was the celebration to mark 40 years at AMWIK. I'm sure this must have come with quite a number of milestones that probably you would like to, share with us. Tell us a bit about how the journey has been and what are the key highlights for you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Serfine, for having me. When we were celebrating AMWIK at 40, it was not just a celebration for AMWIK as an organization, but as women in general in the media. If you sit down with veteran journalists like Joseph Odindo, he'll tell you when the media was starting out, when media houses were being set up in the 1900s, like Standard, 1960s for Nation Media, there were very few women, if at all. And by the time you were having a woman in leadership in the media, it took years and years for that to happen. But right now you have the likes of Pamela Sitoni, you have the likes of Pamela Sigi, Jamila Mbogwa, you can name them and you can see them. So that's one of the things that we were celebrating. The number of women were few, but now there are many, and there are many at the top as well. They may not be at the number that we want them to be at, but at least there is progress. Aside from that, when AMWIK started, they started out as just a group of less than 10 women who wanted to see changes in the media sector. So they would meet in one of their houses, to discuss what can we do to change this space. But right now we have almost 500 members. And considering where AMWIK started from and the vision that the founders had, 500 is quite a big number, And that's just members of AMWIK. There are other women who are members of other associations. So we are many, and that's a celebration. Another thing is the number of partners that have come on board because they're like-minded individuals. For example, the EU in Kenya, you have Article 19, you have Journalists for Human Rights. They also want to see women thrive. So you find that they are seeing what AMWIK is doing and they want to amplify that. They want to amplify the voices of women. So they were part of our celebrations, as you mentioned, during the 2 days, because they have seen where we have come from and they want to see us make even greater gains in the media sector.
So it was an opportunity to celebrate the gains that have been achieved over time.
Yes.
Why is it crucial to discuss the gender agenda when it comes to, media representation? Because I'm yet to see, and correct me if I'm wrong, an association of male journalists coming together to support each other. Why is it important to have an organization such as AMWIK and also to discuss issues revolving around women and their existence in the media? There has to be a story behind that story.
Absolutely. And it stems back to what I was talking about earlier. The media industry was designed by men, for men. And for women to break that, it took a lot. It took the boldness of the AMWIK founders that I'm talking about. It took the boldness of women who were like, I can do this. This is not just a men's thing. I can cover politics. I can cover sports. And for other women to see this being done, it also means that in terms of generation, if your young one can see, for example, Serfine reading news, she'll believe that she can do it as well. Because in the past, they only saw men. So you want women to see other women doing it, to encourage themselves, to give them more confidence. And this is why we have to keep these conversations going. And not to downgrade what men are doing. Men are doing a fantastic job, but we want women to also have a level playing field. And this is why we have associations. And you're not the first one to ask me, how come men don't have associations? It's a valid question, but when you have been here and then you have someone who has been at the bottom, you want to help this person at the bottom rise up. And that is why associations like ours came to be, because they saw that there was a gap in terms of gender. And to lift up the other gender, we decided, why not have a support system, a safe space, somewhere where we can tap into individuals who have gone ahead of us, stand on their shoulders so that we can be at least at the same level.
All right. Yeah. I want us to talk about some of the key issues that have come on the table as issues that women are facing. Probably in the course of that journey, what would you term as some of the biggest challenges that women in the media are facing or have faced over time?
I'll start with the biggest elephant in the room.
Yeah.
I heard earlier when you were talking with your co-host, and he heard that Kenya is leading in sexual harassment cases in Africa, and it was a shock to him. And it's also a shock to many, because the media covers ills in society, but we don't cover ills, you know, within the newsroom. People don't know what goes on in the newsroom. But when you make these things public, then at least there's a mechanism for redress. People know what's going on, and you can find solutions on how to address it. So the first major challenge, I would say, is sexual harassment and the silence around sexual harassment. There is fear. The victims, the survivors, they fear talking about it because of reprisal. They fear they'll lose their job. They fear shame. They will be shamed. They fear being the talk of town. You'll go and report, and all of a sudden your story is, you know, everyone is talking about it. And then even when they do report, nothing is done. You know what I mean? Because most of the perpetrators are in power. They wield power. They decide whether or not you'll have a job to come to tomorrow. And from what I've seen in most media houses, the perpetrators are also able to jump from one media house to another. So you'll find, even if the media house takes this case very seriously and probably fires the perpetrator, whether it's male or female, he will go to another media house and he'll get another job. So the victims ask, why should I report then? What's the point? I will not get justice. This man will continue with his life. This woman will continue with her life. And here I am left to deal with the trauma. And most of the times you find that it's psychological. The effects are psychological, which means it affects your productivity. Basically, sexual harassment is bad for business. And if we don't realize that, it could bring down the media. And that is why there's a lot of talk right now about sexual harassment. Yes.
And it's important that we have you, because you're part of a working group that has been working with media houses to ensure that you know, media houses comply with you know, strategies or efforts to curb this particular vice. Just tell us a bit about how big this problem is. You know, we are talking about sexual harassment in the newsrooms. Somebody would even not believe that it is there in the first place. So how big of a problem is this? And what are some of the loopholes that could be exploited by perpetrators to lead to numbers, you know, being inexistent in the newsrooms?
Aside from the Women in News study that showed that Kenya is leading, the Media Council had also done its own research with Article 19. And they found that 8 out of 10 women in the newsroom are likely to face harassment.
8 out of 10.
8 out of 10. Which means when you're coming in, either as an intern or you're coming in fresh from school, you've graduated and you've been employed as a reporter, you are likely, you will absolutely be at risk of facing sexual harassment. And the number of women leaving the newsroom right now, it is because of sexual harassment. You cannot thrive in an environment where you're looked at as a sexual symbol, where you enter and the first thing someone does is comment on your dressing, or, you know, makes lewd jokes, or you find the person you're sitting next to when you're doing your assignment is watching pornography. That is what sexual harassment is. It makes you uncomfortable, and yet you're supposed to be comfortable when you're in your working environment. So in March 2021, the Kenya Media Council of Kenya brought together 15 organizations working in the media industry to talk about the reasons why women are leaving the media, the reasons why the news industry is not as professional as it should be. And one of the reasons that came up was sexual harassment. And then Amweek now was chosen to lead interventions. So this ad hoc committee, of which I am the chair, has developed a work plan to address advocacy, to address awareness. Some people will tell you, I didn't know that was sexual harassment, and then they will get aware with it, and you can't blame them, because you can't blame someone who tells you I didn't know. But once we deal with this sector of awareness, now that will no longer be an excuse, right? So awareness, advocacy, and then most importantly, redress mechanisms. Because as we were saying earlier, I'm not going to report if I know nothing is going to be done. And even in terms of reporting, do I feel safe enough to report? And for us, Amweek is supposed to be a safe space for women. So the ad hoc committee is also developing an external mechanism of reporting, so that if you don't have belief in your newsroom, you have another avenue to report whatever has happened to you or that you have seen happen to someone else. So this ad hoc committee intends to intentionally address this vice known as sexual harassment. So the work plan is running for a year. It began in November, and we'll start activities like going to newsroom, talking to media owners, and it will run through November 2022. But after that, because this seems to be a much bigger problem, you know, than we realized, I'm sure we will even extend, because partners are now coming on board, like IREX. IREX offers counseling, because the women affected, the men affected need counseling for them to be able to continue working. We have the ODPP as a partner, because we're talking about a justice system, which the process is very long. So once you have a partner like the ODPP on board, you know how serious this matter is, and you at least feel like this matter is being taken seriously.
So far, where are you in terms of implementing that particular work plan? Have you taken a step?
Yes, absolutely. We had, in November 2021, we had a session known as Men to Men, because for the longest time, sexual harassment has been deemed as a fight between men and women. It is not. It is violation of a person's dignity. It's personal, right? And for a person to feel uncomfortable, that means that they can no longer work properly. So that is why we decided to have the Men-to-Men conference. We've had men-to-men in different regions of the country, so that they can be the champions. They can speak out for women, because most of the people affected with sexual harassment are women. The numbers are greater than men, which is why when you have men speaking for women, it is a much better approach than when you have women speaking and complaining about it. There's a friend who calls it the Book of Lamentations. We have been complaining so much.
So you're changing the strategy.
Exactly, we are changing exactly.
Same message, but how you deliver it.
How you deliver it, yes, exactly.
But you also have reality. We also have men that are also falling victim to sexual harassment in the media space. Is that also being considered?
Yes, it is. It is being considered, because they face the same thing that women face. They will not speak up because of the patriarchal system that we live in. A man who comes up and says, I've been sexually harassed, will either be ridiculed, laughed at, or told, you should be enjoying it. You should enjoy the attention. You're a man. And yet he feels violated. And that is why I said it's a very personal thing, sexual harassment. And for you to feel violated, it means you've been affected and you need redress. But for a man to feel safe enough to come up and say that he's been sexually harassed, you have to create a space for him to feel safe, and there has to be systems in place where he can say, okay, this is how I can report and this is what will be done.
All right.
Yes.
Rachel, there's a lot to discuss, and I want us to talk about another elephant in the room that is underrepresentation. But before then, just a general comment on how, this vice could have impacted the performance or, what women are bringing on the table in the media industry, or even just men who have fallen victim on this particular vice. Any impact that you can cite?
Aside from leaving the newsroom and writing off media houses in general, there is a perception that the media is a lion's den. There are people in the newsroom right now who are parents, and they will tell you, I will never allow my daughter to join a newsroom. And it's a shame, because how can you have such a vibrant industry that wields power in society, that sets the agenda, and yet you have parents of the younger generation telling you, no, I won't allow my daughter to. No, I can't. It's unsafe. It's, I don't want her to go through
because of the realities.
Exactly. So we look bad out there, and it's not right. Aside from that, there's the individual. There are women who have become depressed. You find that a woman is a high performer. She does excellent stories. She does excellent coverage of news. I had one of your reporters reading sports news. But then this thing called sexual harassment happens, do you know it changes you as a person? All of a sudden, you're a shadow of your former self. You have self-doubt. You no longer believe in yourself. You start drinking. You start skipping work because you've been affected by what has happened to you. You blame yourself, especially when there is no redress. You blame yourself. You're like, what shouldn't I have done? What should I have done so that it doesn't happen to me, right? So these things that we don't think about, they are all tied to productivity.
Okay.
Yes.
Quickly, just tell us a bit about the underrepresentation. Why is it important to have an adequate, representation of women in the media, especially in the senior position?
Yes.
How will that change anything?
Yeah,
anyway?
That's an excellent question.
Yeah.
And last week, KBC launched its gender mainstreaming policy because they have realized that having women on top adds some sort of value, and the value is quantifiable. I think they said organizations that embrace women in leadership increase a country's GDP by 20 to 30%. So when you look at the bigger picture, you are not doing women a favor. When you embrace women, when you bring them up to leadership positions, it adds something to the economy, because they often say women are the backbone of an economy. So when you have a woman up there, you're assured that your company is going to do well. Aside from that, you will notice that most of the time the coverage that we have on women's issues is very, it lacks depth. It's very shallow. For example, how we cover gender-based violence stories. The woman will be vilified. If at all the woman is the victim, she'll be vilified. She'll be blamed. She'll be asked, why were you wearing that? Then the man will be asked, or rather questions surrounding the man will be like, he was a church-going man, he was a quiet man, she provoked him. And I feel, from where I sit, I feel that if we had gender mainstreaming within media houses, if we had women being the ones who make decisions on how we cover these stories, such things would not happen. Or if we had men who are trained on how to cover traumatic experiences such as gender-based violence, the victim would not be victimized.
All right.
Yes.
Rachel Ombaka, I wish we had more time for this conversation. Of course, we can do this all night. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
And that's how we've come to the end. 30 seconds for your final word as we close this particular interview.
Absolutely. I would love to particularly speak to the younger generation who probably think that the media is not a good place to be. It is a good place to be, especially when you have organizations such as AMWIK speaking out for the rights of women. Maya Angelou said, if you don't like something, change it, right? And if you can't change it, change your attitude, but don't complain. Right? So let's not complain. Right. Let's not lament. Do something about it.
All right. Yes. Avoid the book of lamentations. Thank you. Thank you, Rachel Ombaka, Vice Chairperson, Association of Media Women in Kenya, talking to us about how to balance the imbalance for women in media. And that's how we close this. And of course, I've not been doing this alone. On the other side, John Jacob Kieria, you've had it for yourself. The reality is, in the media, in the newsroom, women dealing with so many issues, but of course there is light at the end of the tunnel.
Quite an interesting conversation you had tonight, and obviously more education needs to be done because there could be those who perpetrate sexual harassment against women and they don't know they're doing it, and that is a critical component in terms of providing education for men and women in newsrooms. That's what we put a cap on Sunday Express. My name is John Jacob Kieria. Enjoy your Sunday. Of course, the week begins tomorrow.
And my name is Serfine Achieng. Have a good night and God bless.